This is Pop Culture Yearbook. On this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Pete.
And I'm Geoff.
And you will notice that sadly, we are without our normal host, Brad, who last week was hilariously murdered right at the end of the episode.
Cut down right in front of us.
Yeah,
right
it was
at the end of the episode. I mean, what are the chances? First off, I mean, how lucky were we to be able to actually finish an episode before he was put asunder?
It was very courteous of the murderer to sit there and wait until we were basically done with the show.
Yeah, that was very nice. Maybe they just enjoyed listening to the recording of the episode and just wanted a sneak peek, to get ahead in Pop Culture Yearbook, order here, and they wanted to hear the whole thing before, knocking them off.
So normally at this portion of the show, we would like to give shout outs. So we want to give a shout out to the murderer for allowing us to finish the episode. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We are very excited about this episode. This is one that, despite the fact that Brad is no longer with us, I've been looking forward to more than any other episode that we have done. Mm-hmm. We have tonight, we are going to have Thaao Penghlis, who you may know as Tony or Andre DiMera from Days of Our Lives. So I am really excited. I know Brad, if he were still with us, he would love to join us on the show, but he can't because he was a big Days of Our Lives fan. I remember we followed them in the magazines and just followed the show. I'm going to bring it up to him about like how we started really watching it when Marlena was possessed by the devil. That was a big deal for everybody, and I think everybody got into the show. I am told.
Are you going to bring it up to him when you go to see your clairvoyant psychic person and talk to him in the afterlife? Is that what you're going to?
I might do that. Yeah. I'll talk to Tony. I'll talk to.
Talk to Thaao about that. I thought you were going to talk to Brad about.
I almost called him Tony. My wife said that I would do that.
You did, though. Very nice.
But work. I didn't. I caught myself. So, Gifford, do you have anything to add about Thaao before we get into the interview?
Well, I will get into a little bit about his podcast that he's doing. It's a 4-parter. It's on Spotify for those who want to listen. It's all about the lost city of Troy and basically proving the myth of Homer's poems, the Iliad and
the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, as maybe being factual and having some facts behind that. So that was fun to dive into him with, along with all the excellent stories he had about Days. So I say we bring him on and please enjoy. It's an excellent interview. He's very gracious with his time and his answers. And it was great.
Mm-hmm. This is a date that we have had circled on our calendar for about 6 or 8 weeks or so. We are very honored to be joined by the Days of Our Lives star, Thaao Penghlis, who you may know as Tony DiMera, and or Andre DiMera. He actually played 2 characters on Days of Our Lives, and so we're going to get into that. So, Thaao, welcome to Pop Culture Yearbook.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here. It doesn't matter how many years I did that show. I'm kind of in a different place now because of the podcast and where I've journeyed. But listen, all the journeys I've taken is because of Days of Our Lives. I mean, if I hadn't been employed for over 40 years, I don't know if I would have had this kind of culture that I've been existing in for many decades. And so, it's all about who you cross your path with, and that certainly was a big influence. And we were talking earlier, but the 20s were the most influential period because that's where you're searching. You're looking for your mentors. You're looking for people that make a difference in your life. And those journeys I took in my 20s are what still resonates today. that influence that I had, the discipline, the appreciation of different cultures, knowing your craft, being respectful for those who are older, learning how to share things. And I found the best thing for me was to learn to cook. And because I went into a lot of kitchens in my 20s because I didn't have much money. So I was always the pretty guest. And that was
I know how you feel.
Yes, I can see that in you.
Yeah. Well, I think your video must not be working very well if that's what you see.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Thanks, bud.
Yeah. But it was, I think when I told my parents I was going to America when I was 19, and they almost had a heart attack because Greek boys didn't leave their homes until their sisters got married. It was those old-fashioned times. And I kind of rebelled against everything. And so I think in many ways, I became the first Greek boy out of Australia to come to the United States, not because I wanted to be an actor, but because I wanted to find who I was. I kind of didn't have any identity because anytime I had an idea or anything, it would be shut down because it wasn't part of the Greek heritage. And so I wanted to get away from that. And so I went to New York and I met all these different cultures. I mean, from the Jewish to the blacks to, and I worked for the UN for 1 year. So I got to meet a lot of wonderful, influential people, including Stephen Sondheim, John Gielgud, Jacqueline Kennedy, Claudette Colbert. And I mean, spend time with them. It wasn't like, hello, how do you do, and move on. No, these were people I spent time with. And they all had one thing in common, is that they had a lot of grace. When you arrive in life, and that takes time, you become an example of your footage, It's the way you have lived. And so that when people look at you, you have become a certain person. And every one of those persons I met had arrived, and they had a wonderful foundation that they stood upon. So, Jacqueline Kennedy was so gracious. She married Onassis 3 months later.
Okay.
John Gielgud, when I was in the fashion world, who taught me perseverance. Robert Redford, who taught me how not to expect to inquire about someone's privacy, or even when I was trying to dress him in the fashion world, not to presume too much, to allow people their own space. So, these were all different things that I started to learn with $180 in my pocket. And that was, when you start from scratch, that's one of the greatest things you can experience, because it's only upwards from there on. And so I remember ravioli, a can of ravioli for dinner, an apple.
Yeah.
I can't stand ravioli. And so I look back at it and I can understand why. But
right. You'll Chef Boyardee.
I love those years, even though they were difficult. I love those years because, God, they did it so differently. I came in at the end of a golden age. When I first walked on in the studios at MGM, and I remember all those evenings I'd gone to the movies and saw those great movie stars, and just kind of thought they were my heroes because of the characters they played. Charlton Heston and Ben-Hur, people who did it well. And so I have to say I'm not disappointed in the life I chose or the way it happened. Could it be better? Yeah. Every life, I think, has its advantages and disadvantages. But I think all in all, once I got onto Days of Our Lives, things started to change. It meant that I was being paid for a profession I chose, not anybody else.
So you say you chose that profession. When did you catch that bug of acting? Like, when was that something you thought, this is something that I would really like to pursue?
Well, my mentor was Milton Katselas, tough Greek, but he was the apprentice to Elia Kazan. So I had that influence coming out of the 40s, Streetcar Named Desire, all those wonderful black and white films that he had directed. Milton was his assistant. I became his assistant. But he taught me different things, but how to direct myself. But it was Stella Adler who made you understand and respect the script, the size of your character, the size of the sky, the manners, how you speak to someone who's older, all those different colors that allows the audience to understand what kind of person you're playing. Today, we don't have that training. And I mean, we got slapped down for being amateurs. We got slapped down because we weren't doing it well enough. And the teachers would get frustrated. And so I spent a lot of time studying those who did it, the greats. And in some way, it, as much as it was at a distance, I was still able to be influenced by those characters.
So, of course, much of your career was on soap operas, of course, Days of Our Lives. You were also on General Hospital, correct, for some time?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what directed you into the soap opera world? Is that a direction that you wanted to pursue, or okay?
No. I tell you what happened. I had done 3 films. That was after doing a play in New York called Jockeys. I did the film The Bell Jar. I did Altered States, and I did Slow Dancing the Big City with John Avildsen, who had just directed Rocky. And then the strike came. So it was 9 months. So all that work that you did to find breaks in the industry, the only thing available was the soaps. And so when I went to General Hospital, I had to test twice because I was foreign. If you know that I was the first English accented actor in daytime. In those days, they only wanted Americans because, let's face it, soap operas were for Americans. And so when I came on, within 3 months, they had hired for the Luke and Laura story, something, and Elizabeth Taylor came on, something like 30 actors. And I never considered myself a lucky person. I always thought what came on my table was something I earned, just like my paycheck.
Sure.
But I remember Gloria Monty. She was the executive producer. I mean, if she saw your balls, she cut them off.
Wow.
You know, she was that kind of a woman. And so she didn't like weaknesses. So I used my smarts to find out where people's character, because ego always reveals. And so she revealed her importance of being powerful, especially as a woman. And so I ignored her. And that is what happened. She came over to me one day. She said, "You happy here?" I said, "Yes, thank you. Was there anything else?" And she looked at me like, "Excuse me." I said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm studying my lines." So I hit the professional page, And so from that moment on, she was paying attention. And then we had a party, and she said for GH, and she told me that she thinks I should get out of daytime, and because she didn't think it was good enough. Now, no one's ever said that to me. Nobody ever praised or gave me that kind of confidence. So when all those actors were either killed off for the summer story, the only one remained was my character, Victor Cassadine. So she told me they were going to bring me back for 2 months. And so out of that, I decided when the head writer was leaving General Hospital, she said, "I'd like to take you over to Days of Our Lives." And that's how the soap started.
Wow.
And what year was this?
This was in 1981.
81.
Okay, wow.
You get to a certain age, you don't give a screw about anything anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, everything's out there.
We're getting there.
Yeah. Well, that is absolutely amazing. And Pete, you talked a little bit before we came on how for you, I was never a big soap opera watcher, but Pete, the folks in college would plan their schedules around Days of Our Lives. I mean, that was the big one for us, at least. This would have been mid 90s that we started college.
Sure.
And it was just absolutely huge for so many people.
Let me tell you this, is that we have, of course, in college, you're always looking for new ways to be able to communicate with the girls in college, right? And we actually had sort of a rule, and we weren't very necessarily good at giving advice or anything like that on how to meet women. One of the most successful tips that we had within our group of guy friends was always know what's happening on Days of Our Lives, because that was going to be your in with just about anybody, because
conversation starter.
you could have that, and you had that rule, and then you'd watch it as a result, and then you get hooked. And where everybody got hooked, and Thaao, I'm sure you recall this, is when Marlena was possessed by the devil in I think it was 1994, 95, in that time frame. That was when everybody was watching. And I would talk to people just at my own school, everybody was watching. At other schools, like our other friend Brad, who's our other host on this show, he was watching religiously. And it was as big of a show as like Friends and Seinfeld, as far as like you would sit down and stop everything, because for us it was on at noon, so that was your lunch hour, and you'd schedule your classes around Days of Our Lives.
Yeah, the golden age were the 80s.
Yeah, okay.
And since I left, I died 7 times. People would ask me, says, which is your favorite death? I said, nobody has a favorite death. I mean, you don't say, oh, I love that death. They're all excruciating because you had to come on that last day and think to yourself as you looked up at the ceiling of the studio, why?
Right.
Why this time? Who did I upset this time? Right. And so there are a couple of writers there that, and listen, not everybody's your friend.
Sure. Okay.
You find out, and as you get older and a lot wiser, you realize that a lot of people are not going to be successful in life. Mm-hmm. And there's a resentment sometimes when the journeys you're taking are full of life and choices. Mm-hmm. It's not about, what am I going to eat tonight? I went through that period. To me, it was, which journey do I take now? And I always noticed that when I came back, I felt really fulfilled out of coming from a great journey, either Egypt or the Middle East somewhere, or Greece or Italy. But I always found out that when I came back, a lot of the actors didn't expand. They just played the same person all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the secret of longevity is being able to go beyond the page and give them something they didn't expect. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because of writing, which I've been doing a lot now, it gives you a different gravitas to a word. It has a different weight. If you ever watched Obama, when he would speak, he'd give you a sentence, and then he would wait for it to land.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then he would go on. Right. There are others who don't understand communication, but he was fantastic. People criticize. I mean, I understand where we're at now in life. It's not about building, it's about taking down. And as an actor, that's what happens to you. I mean, there are some actors that feel threatened, some because you're different to them. You're not as macho, maybe, you're not about threatening or punching. You learn about the grace, and you learn about maturity, you learn about professionalism. And a lot of people who came in were not, that's why their careers lasted a short time. And I remember MacDonald Carey, who was such a gentleman in old school. I went up to him one day and I said, Mac, I said, I've been here for a year and you hardly even say hello. Is there a problem? Mm-hmm. And he turned around to me, he said, I have watched actors come and go, and that always hurts me because some of them I love. I have loved. But when you get to be here for more than 2 years, let me say this, you and I will have great conversations. Nice. So he knew that if you lasted, then the friendship could continue. But a lot of times a lot of people left, even after 13 weeks. So to last this long, everybody has their own recipe as to why they have longevity.
Yep.
Mine is about being professional, knowing my stuff, and always leaving well. I always remember my teacher said that if you're fired, if they kill you off like they have, say hello and goodbye and thank you. Sure. And as they would say sometimes, we'll see you again. Yeah, especially when, I died that many times, they realized, you should bring him back. I don't, and I said, well, why kill me? Why not have me walk up those stairs and take a break? But no, they want ratings, you see.
Right.
They
want ratings.
There's vengeance.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well,
I remember, sorry, I was just going to tell the story. My memory of one time that you died on the show, when I was watching the show, like I said, really religiously, was when you were framing John Black, and it was with pleasure. Yes. You had a terminal illness of some sort, and so you were committing suicide. In doing so, you had a stack of books that was rigged up to a gun. It was a fake stack of books, and it was a gun that, when fired, it dropped into the stack of books so that nobody would find the gun or find how you had died. So you would commit suicide from across the room, which eventually led to John Black's conviction, and he was saved at the last minute in the gas chamber by a pardon because they had found the evidence. I think it was Abe that found the evidence right at the last minute. Do I have that right? Because I was going from memory.
You do, and I'll give you a little secret that happened there. This is how do you change an idea? How do you outsmart them? And I remembered, in those days we weren't allowed to have a cigarette. That was cut out.
Okay.
So what I decided, I had this speech to make before I killed myself. And what I decided to do is have this long, thin cigarette and do the whole sequence with the cigarette. And one day after I killed myself, I was called in months later by the producer. He said, you did a smart thing. You took a cigarette, and we know the character never had a cigarette. So we thought, oh my God, it was an imposter. So we can bring the real one back.
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
That is
brilliant.
That was my first way of coming back and outsmarting them.
That's outstanding.
I want to go back and watch that clip now. Maybe I can find it on YouTube or something. Yeah.
Well, and you talk about, you'd go away, you'd leave, and have your experiences and of course, learning the word on the page. Well, you've obviously also been an author. 2015, you released a book, Seducing Celebrities, One Meal at a Time. So again, that puts us back in the kitchen that you spoke of earlier. And can you tell us a little bit about the process of putting that together and a little bit about
the first book, the first book was Places. And that was the book that took, basically, I thought, my parents died in 95 in the same week together.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, God, there were so many questions I didn't ask. And I thought, I remember part of their history and things they told me. So Places became a story about the journeys I had taken so that the people that would come after me in my family would have a reference about the history. And that's what I wrote that book. But Places is, I had a call from a manager that a book publisher said they would like to have a cookbook from me because they had read that I liked to cook. And because I always described food for me as a celebration. It should be a celebration of life, celebration of many things we do. And so that we don't shortchange ourselves, so that we have respect, not for the food we take, but for ourselves. I mean, what is it we put in this body and how do we share it? And so to me, food is about seducing people if you cook well. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
talking about a hamburger either, but
right.
Things they don't expect. And so you create the atmosphere. And Doris Roberts, who is a dear friend, and she did the preface to the book, Seducing Celebrities. She said she would come in. Of course, she'd always sit in my chair, which was the head of the table, because, you know, divas are divas. And so she would come in and she would sit there, bring you a bottle of champagne, and you'd think at first, oh, isn't that gracious of her? She brought me a bottle of Dom Perignon. And then she would turn around and say, would you open my champagne for me, please? And proceed to drink the whole bottle for the evening while she was being served. But what she loved about the evening was the atmosphere that was created, the aroma when she came in of the cooking in the kitchen, the atmosphere. And then she would sit down and I would proceed to do 3 courses. And this table that I'm speaking to you from has had so many wonderful evenings of where people stayed 12, 1, 2 o'clock. I mean, I start early because I know they're going to stay longer, and great conversations, because that's part of the old school. You know, when you go to Europe or you go to New York, to these places in those days, people, when they served food, it was out of respect, not just for yourself, but respect for what you're giving to others. And so it becomes the celebratory thing that I am able to share with someone. And so that's how Seducing Celebrities came along. So I thought, well, it contains, if I didn't cook for them, what would I have cooked for them? Like Jacqueline Kennedy, I had Greek shortbread, but I decided, because she married Onassis and because she loved Greek heritage, history, I said, well, I'll do an evening of Greek food with her. So everybody, those who sat here, so I wrote about them too. And Telly Savalas, you know, what did I cook for Telly? He always liked pasta, but I would cook for certain people a certain way. And so I never wrote anything down. I never wrote a recipe down. It all came out of my head. It's like when I open the fridge, I say, okay, what am I going to eat? I don't think, you know, I have to start something from scratch because I know what goes into it.
Sure.
So that way, you know, your health is important, and how, you know, this is the body we chose, and how do we treat it? So that's how the cookbook came along. And so I'm still doing it. And even though it's exhausting now, the only thing is, people don't reciprocate. Do you know what I mean? It's like a one-sided affair. They don't know, you know, and then they'll say to me, what can I bring? I said, you don't ask a Greek what you're going to bring. Just bring whatever you want to bring. And they get all confused and everything. I said, listen, just bring cash. So
it's always accepted.
Yeah, accepted everywhere. So
I would like to say, you brought up Doris Roberts, God rest her soul. I would put her at the top of my list, or near the top, as far as an actress that played one of the, and I mean this in the best way possible, the worst characters on television. And that's why I love her so much, because she brings out that, you know, you just can't stand her as Ray's mom on Everybody Loves Raymond. And I think that's such a mark of a great actor that can conjure this feeling towards her character. I just absolutely loved her in that show. She just did such a great job. But just wanted to bring that up with Doris.
She's, you know, I studied with her for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
That's how I got to know her.
Okay.
And then one day I said to her, would you like to come over for dinner? And she said, I never thought you'd ask. And so I had her, and then she would always call me up during the week and saying, well, are we having dinner again? You know, when are we getting together? Because she was like Joan Rivers. They had to have their diary filled. They couldn't stand having a day empty. They couldn't just be on their own, because that would bring out the loneliness of people. And she would stay for a long, long time. And I always remember the way she'd come and kiss me on the lips and just say to me, you know, thank you. Can I take you out for dinner? I said, sure, Doris. So then I pick her up, and we go out for dinner. And then the bill comes, and she says, "Do you mind, darling, if I pay the next one?"
Mm-hmm.
So it was like,
yes, invite you out. She invited you to come out and pay for dinner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I know that move. Yeah.
I think a lot of what you're talking about is becoming a lost art, unfortunately, in that there just isn't as much as there used to be. The late nights, having company over and cooking for each other. Now it's like communication is done over Twitter, social media, and texting, but it's like there's not as much focus on each other as there used to be.
You're absolutely right. It's one of my complaints about what people have become. You know, after I've spent 2 days preparing, buying food and doing and inviting and getting the house together, don't give me 2 lines and say thank you, it was a wonderful evening. It doesn't suffice.
Mm-hmm.
Call me up and make me feel like I want to do it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think people, they've become so self-centered. They don't haven't arrived in life long enough to be able to see the whole picture. And the whole picture is, this is a team. Friendships are a team. So what do we do for you? But they don't think that way. It's just about, it's convenient. Everything's become convenient.
Yes.
And it's like, so I complain about it to people. Sometimes they think I'm being a pest, but I'm saying this for you, because what's going to happen later is you'll be on your own and you're not going to be able to reach for somebody and you're not being invited because you didn't make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
How do you make a difference with people in their lives? By contributing. Mm-hmm. And people just are on the take all the time. And the great ones that I had in my life, they're gone now, because I always had older people around me because they knew more than I did. And I also appreciated, just their history, the respect of their life. And so now I'm thinking seriously that I may be moving back to Australia because, I like the idea when I was in Greece, I went to my nephew's wedding. It was okay. It just happened to rain on the day of the wedding, which was on the outside. But as somebody said, listen, when it rains, the more the rain, the tighter the knot. And so I had to make the journey more than just about a wedding. So that's why I went to Turkey and had I went to this place they call the Hammam. It was built in 1731. Where they throw you on a slab of marble and then they attack you and scrub you like you're a child. And I tell you, then they massage your feet. Then they put you in a room with a cup of lovely tea and little hors d'oeuvres. And then they give you the massage of your life. And you come out of there thinking, this is how kings live.
Yeah.
It was magnificent, that kind of, because what it takes away is all the stuff we've put on ourselves. And so it was, and then I went to the Topkapi Museum because I wanted to see all that history. And so now I'm thinking I want to go back and explore it even more because my parents came from Constantinople. So when I did my DNA, I found out that I was 48% Italian, Greek, Egyptian and Turkish. So obviously within that vicinity of the Mediterranean, the Middle East is where my heritage comes from.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
go ahead, Giff.
Well, I was just going to say, you speak of your travels and your love of history and your current endeavor. Now we've gotten into a podcast. And that is, the name of the podcast is The Lost Treasures, and primarily focuses around the city of Troy. Mm-hmm. And forgive me if I mispronounce his name, but Heinrich Schliemann. Sorry, Schliemann. Yeah.
Yes.
Father of archaeology, or considered one of the fathers of archaeology, and did quite
Yes,
a bit
he
of
is the
work on
father.
Troy.
Yes, he was the father of archaeology. It was the 19th century was a time of really unspoken past, and the history that he went into was the time in Greece, in the ancient world, of where there was nobody could read or write, and so we had orators, and the orators would go to clubs or cafes with an instrument and talk about the warriors of their ancient world. Excuse me. And when I went to Troy, which I did a few times, I actually drove. Then I found out that I could have caught a plane. That would have been half an hour, but I drove for 8 hours. But I saw the landscape, right? But I passed these cafes of where it was just men who smoked like crazy, but they told stories, and that goes as far back as the 8th century BC. That's how they communicated. That was their radio, their TV of the times, of where somebody would give you a story, and that was Homer, who did the story on Ulysses and the story on Troy. So this time, because I'd gone there a number of times, and also I spent a number of weeks going through 60,000 documents at the Gennadius Library in Athens, where I had in my hands the diaries and the letters of this great, great scholar who spoke 22 languages, and the love story between him and his wife, Sophia, that he regarded as his Helen of Troy.
Yep.
So then I go to Mycenae, which is in the southern part of Greece, in the Peloponnesos, of where he was digging inside this citadel of this ancient city, which was around 1500 BC, and he came across gold masks. And when he lifted those masks, he saw a human being, what they looked like from that many centuries back, and then within seconds, the face became dust. So he found 5 of them. And so that became the second podcast. The first one is how he believed that the Iliad, Homer's Iliad, was a map to finding Troy. The second was bringing the myth of the ancient kings of Agamemnon and Menelaus, who went to Troy and fought the Great War, and that they were not myths at all. And then the third, what's exciting about the third one for me was I read that these 2 British scholars, one called Bittlestone and Crawshaw, Bittlestone in 2003 realized when he was standing in the middle of this valley in an island called Kefalonia in Greece, he realized it didn't seem natural. So he got a geologist to find out, was there ever an earthquake here? Because it seemed like he was standing really not on solid ground, but just on rocks, and underneath there was still water. And so they found out between the centuries of the 4th and the 6th, an earthquake so humongous that it took an entire mountain down and made 2 islands into one. So they lost track of Ulysses Island. So here I am with this man called Crawshaw, and he showed me, we climbed up and down these mountains. I'm standing on the soil that beneath me, he believes, is the castle of Ulysses.
Oh my God.
He takes me to lunch, and he says to me, in a place called the Forcas Bay, and here we are up high, and there's the bay, and he says that bay is where Ulysses came home after the war, and he sneaked up and found his goat herdsman, and we're having lunch now. And I went, oh my God, all that many years ago, and there it is in front of you. So I decided to go down after lunch and go for the swim in those ancient waters. So I could be part of that environment, so that when I came to write, I had experience as much as I could, where I could say, yes, I walked the ancient road of warrior kings.
So your first episode you dropped on September 5th.
Yes.
And the second one came out
this week
on the 19th
yes.
of September. So is it every 2 week
Yes, every
drops?
2 weeks.
And it's a 4 episode
Four
limited?
segments.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
the 4 segments. The last segment is why did I decide to do a podcast?
We ask ourselves the same thing.
Yes.
Anyway, go on.
How dare you interrupt?
Yeah.
No, the fourth one, the Hezbollah, when I was in southern Lebanon, pulled me out of the car. I was so intrigued with the bullet holes that of the war with Hezbollah and the Israelis. And because I was kind of paused in the car and looking at them, the next thing I knew is the car door opens, this bull of a character pulls me out of the car, throws me against the wall, and thinks I'm an Israeli spy. What I found out 2 days before, they found 2 Israeli spies and they hung them in the square. So if it wasn't for the new UN guy who recognized me, because he was from New Zealand, and he came and saved me from them. And then that's one of the stories. The other was when they tried to kidnap me in Giza at night at 1 o'clock in the morning, when I foolishly went to see the Great Pyramid at my feet, and with the full moon just like a halo on top of Cheops Pyramid. And then 5 guys came and tried to drag me into the sands. And then when I went to Israel to promote Days, because Days was very big there, I was surrounded by Mossad agents. And those Mossad agents thought I was a terrorist. So I've combined these different stories about this simple life that I've had. And it makes it, listen, it's got a lot of gravitas to it. They're not, I went to dinner. I mean, I actually went through these experiences. And so that's what the podcasts are. So I hear there was a good record amount of people who listened to the first podcast. Now with the second. Oh, did you hear the first one?
Yes, I listened to the first one. I didn't realize the second one came out just 2 days ago, so I will be listening to that one as well. I gotta say, I mean, your voice just brings you into the story. I mean, I don't think I'm talking out of school here. You've got a great voice, so it's right. It brings you in, and the content of it is excellent. It's written, beautifully, and it's just you weave the story so well. It was just really intriguing to listen to. So I certainly enjoyed the first one, and I'm going to be listening to the second one here very shortly. So
yeah, the second one is one of my favorites of the 4, because it really takes you into Schliemann and what he went through in his youth, and how he succumbed, and how he collapsed in the gutter basically in Naples. It's kind of sad in many ways, but when I was in Athens this last time, I went back to his palace, which is now the Numismatic Museum, and I just walked through it, and because I know his history, and I've even a number of times gone to where he's buried in the first cemetery of Athens, and it was, there were flowers there, and I thought to myself, wow, those flowers, that means they're still thinking of him, someone is. And there's a bronze door. It's like a miniature Acropolis, and he's bust at the top. You can't miss it, because when you come into the cemetery, there it is up on a hill. And he's overlooking the Aegean, and there's all this wonderful carved relief around his tomb. And then I thought to myself, I wonder how he's buried in there. Is he buried like, just in there? So I went to the guard. A couple of dollars always helps. So I said to the guard, how's he buried in there? He says, well, his wife's in there, and one of his children and grandchildren, because there's no heirs anymore. He's buried underneath. His whole body is tiled over, so that, I always think, 200 years from now, when someone's saying, well, who was he really? What have we missed out? Do they then, open that bronze door and go down and start breaking up the Thaao to see what did he take with him?
Sure.
Did he take the book of Homer with him? Did his wife leave him something? What is he left with, And so there's still, for me, there's still questions to ask, because, you must remain and have some mystery. You don't want to be an open book. You want people to wonder about you, And so, therefore, these stories, to me, are someone who brings a myth and makes it into a reality, that for years we thought, Hollywood bastardizes the stories sometimes, like they did with Troy.
That's true.
It's a big lie.
Yeah.
Those things didn't happen the way they did it. But I don't know. You go to Troy, you sit on top of 9 cities that are built over each other, and someone said to me one day, well, it's just rocks. And I said, yes, but you don't have an imagination, because when you sit at the edge of Troy and you look out at that, what they call the where the swamp now is, this 3,000 years ago, a great battle took place. If you listen hard enough and imagine, you still can believe how that war took place.
One of the parts from the first podcast that gave me a bit of a chuckle was when you spoke about going to the palace, and you were given permission to go in. So you go up and you knock on the door, and this caretaker lady comes to meet you, and she wouldn't take you through the front door. She took you through a side door. Like, you don't deserve to go in the front door, sir. You can come in this way, and I'm going to keep a close eye on you while you're
She
here.
felt I was an intrusion.
Yeah.
The way she responded, because she believed it was her house. She was the caretaker, and how dare you come in? Who are you? That kind of thing. And then she had to get on a box in order to turn on the light. She was so small.
That's right.
So that was. But because I spoke Greek, and when I eventually spoke Greek to her, well, suddenly I was a relative,
Oh,
so,
sure.
Oh, come on in.
So come on in, so that was that was.
That is outstanding.
I think it's one thing to travel like you obviously do. It's another to go off the beaten path, right? And so it's like so many of us, we travel and we go to the main tourist attractions, and then we come home. But I think that you are able to find the interesting points of interest that maybe aren't in a brochure, or that kind of thing. And I think you are able to dig a little deeper than the average American.
Well, Brian, it was I took 2 weeks off, and I took a tour up and down the Nile of where the Holy Family hid from Herod in the year 4.
Right.
Where did they go? And I visited and stayed within these areas of holiness. And I remember going into St. George's Church in ancient Cairo. And when I walked in, the monk looked at me and he says, "You Greek?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Come here." And he opened this grate in the church floor, took me down, 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 down. And I go down into under the church, and there is this well. And then there's a cave. He says, "This is where," I didn't ask for it, but this is the way sometimes your path crosses when you are in the right place at the right time. And he said to me, "This is where the Virgin Mary, they developed this well, and she blessed this water. It still runs after 2,000 years. Over here is where they hid in the cave. Take your time, spend time here, and when you're finished, come back up." So that, doing that, and then doing the 2 weeks of getting me interested into these very remote places where they hid, was one of the stories I want to tell. And it was just, when you say how you go off the beaten path, well, there are so many things that people don't explore. I always say to my brother, who just got back from Greece, I said, "You've got to," he says, "if I see one more icon, I'm going to scream." And I say to him, if you do your homework, the piece becomes even more interesting.
Yes.
If you just look at it as a picture, you'll pass it. If you don't know what's behind it,
right.
You don't know who the artist was and why they painted this. It's how people have lived that, So for my job in life, I believe, is to remind people of those memories that still exist.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
You know,
And to stay curious. I think that's one of the great things that you've done.
Yeah.
It's like you said earlier. Most people are going to walk right past Troy and think it's a pile of rocks. That's exactly it. I probably wouldn't even think anything of it. I'd be, like you said. But when you understand the history behind it, then you're able to envision what the true meaning of it is. And you get a much, much deeper understanding of our world history, really.
Yeah, but it's what builds your foundation. I mean, you know, the reason why I stay younger in my life is because I have built an enormous foundation of where those who came before me left a mark. It's up to me to rediscover that and then share it. You know, that's what we talked about earlier about people and entertaining. People don't share. They think it's okay to just say, all right, thank you, and that's it. And then you say, well, why don't you make a difference? Why don't you bring something into the picture? I just got back from this journey. I haven't had one friend call me and say to me, how was it? What did you find? What did you explore? Because they don't do that. Deidre Hall
Marlena
wrote to me,
for the
wrote to me, and she said, where are you? I said, I'm in Turkey. She goes, aren't you scared? And I went, no. I mean, what would I be scared of? I was scared in the beginning when I first went to Egypt because I didn't know the game.
Sure. And being drugged towards the sand by a group of men might scare you.
Yes.
A little bit.
I would be
rifles and all that. Yeah, that was not. But now, no, I know to have a guide pick me up at the airport and take me back. I don't walk around by myself in these countries because people are looking for weaknesses. There's something that they can take advantage, you know, so.
Right.
Well, yeah.
All right.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. We really, really do appreciate you. I know you say, well, just don't say thank you and send me on my way. But we certainly do appreciate you coming on, Thaao, and sharing your story with us, not only with, you know, the pop culture side of things for us with Days, but, you know.
We never talked about the pop culture.
But well, that was the Days, you know. Yeah.
Well, we can. If you have anything you want to add.
Well, you know, let me put it this way. One time I was in the garage in an agent's building, and Pat Boone, because in the 50s, when I was a kid, Pat Boone had some wonderful music, right?
Yeah.
And I remember him coming in, and there was this, I thought, I wonder who owns this bright blue Cadillac, you know, with the fins.
Sure.
And there he is, and he comes. And I just stood there and I said, oh my God, it's Pat Boone. And he looked at me and he goes, hello. I said, I have to tell you something. In my youth, in times of trouble, sounds like a song, but in times of trouble,
a little Simon and Garfunkel.
I said, your songs gave me so much solace and meaning that I came out singing your songs, and you were a tremendous influence on my youth in Australia. And I have to tell you, with such humility, and this just warmed him up because, you know, he's not that well known, except for those of us who remember those times. But I mean, he was a huge artist, and it just made, you know, such a difference. Andy Warhol. I mean, I could go on with stories, but yeah. So,
well, we have to have you on again so that we can continue the conversation. Absolutely.
I always have something to say, but I'm not just Tony DeMera. Somebody says to me,
"Oh no!"
When you told the story of the second one, I had a feeling it was Andre DeMera talking. People like to they think, you know, when it's threatening or something, you must be the other character. They said, which character do you enjoy the most? I said, the one that threatens. I said, it's much, much more fun to me to upset someone and see their response. Like John Black, I loved upsetting him. And that gave me even more.
Upset him. You almost killed him, for Pete's sake.
Oh God,
that would be upsetting.
That man. But anyway, you know what was great about the interview, thank you, is that you are great listeners as well. You asked me some wonderful questions, And it's kind of nice at this stage of my life that, well, we can still talk about things that have meaning.
Yes. That's what we go for on this show. We're just going for to try. Anytime somebody comes to us after listening to our episode, and if we talk about any particular movie, they say, "Hey, you know what? I hadn't thought about or watched that movie for quite some time, but your podcast inspired me just to go back and watch it and relive the time that I enjoyed it when I was a kid, or that song that I used to enjoy. I pop it back in, and that's what means the most to us."
Yeah.
So
well, and I will say, Thaao, that we are not great interviewers, but you did a wonderful job, and I thank you
did all the
for
work,
it.
man.
Just taking our
you were
questions
great.
and going. Yeah, it was
great just to see your reaction at times. You were present.
Yeah.
That makes a difference. Because when I did an interview recently with somebody and they asked me, "Oh, you'd climb Mount Sinai," and I said, "What was that like?" And as I am describing it, they're reading at their notes and their mind is elsewhere. And I said, "Listen, if you're going to ask a question, can you listen?"
Yeah.
And make it really thrown.
Yeah.
What I do.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's very important in the way your face is lit up. I mean, you can see when the people you're speaking to, if they're being affected or not. I mean, we didn't fall asleep. So
well, and Pete wasn't lying when we set this up. I think 6 to 8 weeks ago. This has been a big deal for both of us to have you on tonight, and we certainly appreciate you coming on to spend time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Take care. Bye bye.
Right. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Well, Giff, I don't know about you, but I thought that was about as good as it gets for interviews, for podcast interviews. I was just blown away by everything that he had to say. I thought that we were going to talk pretty much all about days, but the conversation just took a life of its own, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I've listened to talk show hosts in the past, and they talk about who their favorite guests are, and a lot of them come back to Martin Short, because you can ask a very simple question, and Martin will just take it and go and give an entertaining story or something, and it just makes their job easier as an interviewer. Thaao is absolutely in that same class. We are not good interviewers here. We're not experienced. We've tried. We've had some very, very good guests on in the past. Thaao did a great job of taking our haphazard and maybe awkward questions or awkwardly phrased questions and just running with them. And I just really appreciate his candor and him coming on here tonight to share his stories, not only about days, but his other ventures with writing books, as well as his new podcast that he has out. And again, please find that on Spotify. It's called the Thaao Penghlis The Lost Treasures. It's a 4-part podcast, and it's very interesting. He does a wonderful job with it, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's just a little bit more cultured than you and I are.
A little bit.
Yeah. He's more in Brad's territory, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yes, he is. Well, and on a personal note here, I just received my very first passport just the other day in the mail. So I'm going to become a world traveler. I'm hoping to become as well traveled as Thaao and see the sights of the world like he has. So
is it for anything in particular, an upcoming trip?
That's none of your damn business.
Okay. All right. We won't go public with it. All right. Well, you're not quite as gracious and friendly as Thaao is about that kind of stuff.
I am not. No.
Well, I was just trying to understand you more as a person because I learned a lot. It changed me as a person in some ways because we got into some deep philosophical conversation as well about how we need to pay more attention to each other as people and show more appreciation. And that's all I was trying to do for you. And then that's how you're responding to me.
I'm sorry, Pete. I apologize, but still, it's none of your damn business.
You're right.
So, hey, folks, please be sure to join us next week as we get back into our regular programming, and hopefully we can conjure some soap opera magic and see if we have maybe a resurrection on our next episode.
Resurrection? I wonder who that could be.
I don't know. We'll have to.
Can we pick who we get to resurrect, or does it have to be a particular individual? Because I've got a lot of people I might choose.
I don't know if we're going to
ahead of the one that it's going to be, but anyway. Anyway. But do you know who has found a second life on Pop Culture Yearbook?
Is it Preacher Row?
It is Preacher Row. They have. Yes. And they have not yet died 7 times.
No, they have not. It's amazing how many questions the answer is Preacher Row.
That's
right. It is absolutely amazing.
It's always Preacher Row. Love them.
It is. Well, thanks for listening, folks. I hope you enjoyed this one.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do.